The normalization of deviance is a concept we don't discuss enough. It explains so much about American society, from corn addiction to the rise of bigotry and white supremacy in on the American social scene and in American politics, even to the rise of the Epstein class. The normalization of deviance plays a significant role in all of these things and many more. The term was originally coined in the context of engineering disasters, and it describes the slow, almost invisible process by which organizations come to accept behaviors that violate their own standards simply because nothing catastrophic has happened yet. A risky shortcut becomes a tolerated exception, then a routine practice, and eventually it just becomes the new baseline. The danger never disappears. It just becomes like familiar enough that people stop seeing it. This dynamic, first identified in high stake fields like aviation and spaceflight, now maps uncannily onto the political culture of the United States. In today's political environment, behaviors that once would have triggered bipartisan alarm have become ordinary through repetition. Actions that previously sat outside the boundaries of democratic norms, refusing to accept electoral outcomes, using rhetoric that casts political opponents as existential threats, or treating institutional guardrails as optional, they just no longer provoke the shock they once did. The first time a norm is broken, it feels like a rupture. The 10th time, it feels like Tuesday. This is the heart of normalization of deviance. The system adjusts to the violation instead of correcting it. So what happens is that the absence of immediate disaster is often misread as proof that the deviation is harmless. When a breach of democratic expectations doesn't produce instant institutional collapse, it becomes easier for political actors and the public to treat it as acceptable. The system held, so the behavior must not have been dangerous. But this is the same logic that allowed NASA to treat O-ring erosion as normal before the Challenger explosion. The lack of catastrophe is not evidence of safety, it is evidence of luck. In politics, as in engineering, luck eventually runs out. And institutions themselves adapt to these new baselines. Congress, courts, state legislators, political parties recalibrate their expectations around what counts as normal political conduct. Extraordinary tactics become standard tools. Rhetorical escalation becomes background noise. The threshold for what constitutes a crisis rises, not because the situation is healthier, but because people are exhausted. Opponents of norm-breaking behavior become numb from overexposure, and supporters often reinterpret the same behavior as strength, audacity, or even necessary disruption. Once a deviation becomes familiar, it can be reframed as a virtue. Media ecosystems also accelerate this drift. The spread of the news cycle ensures that behaviors that once would have dominated public attention for weeks now pass in hours. The sheer volume of political conflict makes it harder for the public to distinguish between routine disagreement and genuine democratic backsliding. This is flooding the zone. When everything is a crisis, nothing is. And when nothing is a crisis, deviance flourishes. This is how the Overton window shifts, not through a single dramatic event, but through a slow erosion of expectations. Normalization of deviance doesn't tell us who is right or wrong. It explains how systems drift. It shows us why democratic erosion often feels invisible until it is advanced, and why societies can lose guardrails without ever consciously deciding to. The danger is not just the deviant act itself, but the gradual cultural acceptance that follows. Once a society becomes accustomed to crossing red lines, it becomes hard to remember why those lines existed in the first place.